Welcome to this week's OK at Work with myself, Sarah Sawyer, my colleague Russell Berger, both attorneys at Offit Kurman. And today we are talking about the FTC non-compete ban because why not? Still in the news, lots still going on there. So we were all prepared to have this to go into effect September 4th potentially, but we were monitoring whether there was going to be a block on that from the courts. And spoiler alert, there is a block on it from the courts. So what's the latest, Russell, and what do employers need to be thinking about?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's one of those things where, it's not a huge surprise to us. And we were kind of expecting this. I think just the court process really made us sweat this out. I'm appreciative of the fact that this ruling came, a couple weeks before the September 4th deadline, as opposed to, on August 30th, as the court's self-imposed deadline was. But, the good news here is we don't have to deal with this FTC non-compete ban right now. The FTC has indicated that they are going to appeal. It could make its way through the courts. We could end up with a Supreme Court decision on it. But I think, we're generally more confident in the appellate courts affirming this decision than we were at the district court level, which is where the nationwide prohibition on the FTC's non-compete ban was recently decided. So, I don't think we're ever going to have to actually deal with this rule. But, it'll still be in the news. It's going to make its way through the courts. That could kick around for a while. Obviously, depending on how the election goes, that could change whether or not this appeal continues to be pursued. But, at this point, we see it being pursued, which kind of gets us back to business as usual when it comes to non-competes and restrictive covenants more generally. But obviously, business as usual has been trending towards less and less favorable treatment of non-competes, and kind of gets us back into that conversation of this is not a one-size-fits-all, let's just use a non-compete, we'll be all good type of conversation. It's a whole bunch of non-solicits, confidentiality, non-disclosure, training reimbursement, all those things that we've talked about before, I think should again be part of the conversation. I should say, still be part of the conversation.
Yeah, and I think it's as far as like where we'll see this going and how much longer it'll be in the news, is that obviously the courts, it takes a long time for things to work its way through. So I'm sure we'll keep seeing it pop up in headlines and still be of interest. But I think from a practical perspective, just like you're making, Russell, it's just given all the noise around this, even just from an employee perspective, like the employees have been seeing this right in the news and around, and they're very aware, I think, of the environment around the non-competes, and that there's a lot of just reading headlines and I've seen, with some of my clients, them getting some additional pushback from employees on signing non-competes and feeling empowered kind of from this latest cycle of headlines. So I think it's even more imperative now than it was before we just dealt with this most recent news cycle, that you be really thoughtful from a talent retention perspective as well, and just kind of what you're asking of your employees, because it's, definitely the trends are still trending away from non-competes, and also just from a practical perspective, I think employees are less likely to tolerate them over time.
Yeah, for sure. Right. And I mean, we're sitting here in Maryland every year, or not every year, but several of the last few years, the General Assembly has put greater restrictions on the use of non-competes generally. And we know that's the nationwide trend. So you're right, both on the employee practical side as well as the legal side, other laws. Now, we might not have to concern ourselves with the FTC ban for now, and maybe ever, but we're seeing more and more restriction of non-compete, and that still is kind of the wave. So while this wasn't the tidal wave that wiped everything out, those waves are still coming, and it still makes sense to be prepared and to have alternate means of protecting yourself in place.
Yeah. Well, thanks, Russell. We'll see you next time.
Thanks, Sarah.